The terrorist attack on a music festival and other targets in Israel left hundreds dead. Others were taken hostage. The subsequent Gaza war has resulted in many more deaths. Since October 7th, 2023, the world has been polarised. The fallout has been immense, including in the arts. In Germany, even Jewish artists and intellectuals have been criticised.
We've seen a long list of Jewish and Jewish Israeli individuals being publicly lambasted, denounced, deplatformed, stigmatized.
Palestinian artists also see themselves in a tight corner.
I felt at the beginning of the war trapped in my own space where I feel I can no longer say what I think or feel.
Protests around the world have deepened divisions. The cultural scene has become as hostile as the political climate.
People on all sides are carrying very deep wounds, so there can be no dialogue.
Starting at 6:30 a.m. on October 7th, Hamas fired more than 3,000 rockets at Israel in a deadly surprise attack. And that was just the beginning.
It's not just the rockets that flew, there was more. We waited 2 or 3 hours to find out just how big the catastrophe was. And since then, we have been in this 7th of October. If you ask Israelis today, what day is it? It's still the 7th of October, 2023.
1,200 people were killed in the attacks carried out by Hamas and other militant Islamist fighters. Victims were raped and, according to official figures, 251 people were taken hostage. The attack sparked outrage in many parts of the world.
Of course, October 7th was a horrifying day, a dark day in history. There is no question about that. But did it surprise me? Absolutely not. Actually, since years, the situation in Israel and Palestine is going down the drain like never before.
There were other reactions. Celebrations on the day of the attack. In Berlin, a radical pro-Palestinian group handed out sweets. Street battles with the police followed. Sometimes it was a resounding silence that came. More than a few Israelis felt abandoned, even by those they thought were their allies.
It seems to me that for 24 hours, the left could have expressed something that vaguely approximates with humanitarian sensibility, compassion. So not only was this entirely absent, but in fact we saw from the left a new form of what I would call negationism.
Such coldness, especially in progressive circles, really surprised me. It's something I never would have dreamed of.
Israel responded to the terrorist attack by bombing the Gaza Strip and sending in ground troops, vowing to destroy Hamas. In September 2024, Palestinian authorities said the death toll in Gaza had reached over 40,000, mostly women and children.
The war in the Gaza Strip, which is still ongoing, has filled me with horror. Because it was clear to me from the outset that a new era had begun. That that the world had simply become a different place.
The war has been accompanied by vigils and demonstrations, some in solidarity with Israel, but most have been pro-Palestinian and have often accused Israel of genocide, an accusation that the International Court of Justice in The Hague is currently considering. The cultural scene has been ill-equipped to deal with the strains, and there's been a great deal of fear of doing something wrong, especially in Germany, where criticism of Israel might be seen as anti-Semitic. At the Frankfurt Book Fair, shortly after the Hamas-led attack, Palestinian author Adania Shibli was due to receive a prize. Her novel Minor Detail tells of the murder of 2 Palestinians by Israelis. The award ceremony was postponed indefinitely. Things got difficult for other Palestinians too. Steve Sabella was due to open an exhibition in Berlin in October, one that was to focus on his Palestinian identity. This too was postponed, but later rescheduled.
I was flat sick, from October 7. I had an exhibition opening on October 11, which did not happen, and it was called Transcendence. It's about my journey of transcendence, of feeling, becoming a free human being. No longer feeling under occupation whatsoever.
And then a renowned Jewish artist, Candice Breitz from South Africa, who has lived in Berlin for many years, was hit. Her long-planned exhibition on sex work in South Africa was cancelled by the Saarland Museum.
Desperate measures. So yo, ho, check it, double deck it, on a regular but naked. Best ass gets respected, miss, but it's none of your business.
Breitz is accused of not speaking out clearly enough against the Hamas attack. A completely false accusation, she says.
My crime was to have failed to sufficiently compare the atrocious events of the 7th of October with the events of the Holocaust. Anyone can still visit my social media platforms and see that I, in fact, had unequivocally and on several occasions denounced Hamas strongly without needing to be prompted by non-Jewish Germans to do so.
Other Jewish figures have had similar experiences in Germany. Philosopher Nancy Fraser was due to take up a visiting professorship in Cologne, but had signed an appeal for solidarity with Palestinians, which did not mention the Hamas attack. The invitation was withdrawn. Professor Judith Butler formulated a provocative thesis about October 7 as armed resistance and received censure and criticism. Russian-American writer Marsha Gessen controversially compared Gaza to the Warsaw Ghetto. An awards ceremony was postponed. Cancelling Jewish artists and intellectuals to combat anti-Semitism? The debate is increasingly fraught. For decades, the lesson of the Holocaust, the murder of 6 million Jews, seemed clear. Jewish life needed to be protected in Germany and in Israel.
Diese historische Verantwortung Deutschlands ist Teil der Staatsräson meines Landes.
Staatsräson, reason of state, the term former German Chancellor Angela Merkel used in 2008, has shaped the discussion in Germany, with some questionable consequences.
The tendency in Germany at the moment is that freedom of expression must be limited if there is even the slightest suspicion of anti-Semitism in the air. That's a real danger.
In addition, Germany uses a broad definition of anti-Semitism, the so-called IHRA definition. It is widely used. A number of experts say it's problematic.
If you automatically think that any and all criticism of the state of Israel or of Israel's policies is anti-Semitism, then you create an unfounded definition or idea of what anti-Semitism is. And that is what the IHRA document creates.
When the definition of anti-Semitism gets so grotesquely broadened, then it becomes very easy to lose sight of the actual violent anti-Semitism that truly continues to threaten the safety of Jewish people all over the world.
German politicians are currently struggling to come up with a new resolution on anti-Semitism, based on the controversial IHRA definition. The cultural scene is alarmed. Will artists have their political views examined? Will public funding be dependent on passing the test? Around 90% of the German cultural scene could be affected. Is a resolution in Parliament the right way to combat anti-Semitism? Many people already fear that Germany has suffered damage to its reputation as a cultural centre. Artists like Steve Sabella see freedom of expression under threat.
I came to live in Germany by choice, to live in the land of free thought, free expression, okay? For me, Berlin probably the last city that really embraced self-expression freedom. And it's really sad that we reached a point where we don't feel that state of freedom like it used to be.
It's difficult for Palestinians like Steve Sabella in Germany, the country that perpetrated the Holocaust and has made Israel's security a reason of state, is struggling with its relationship to Palestinians.
Germany's history is a stumbling block, an obstacle on the way to complete solidarity with the Palestinians.
Protesters often use the controversial slogan, "Free Palestine from German guilt." Has guilt blinded Germany to injustices against the Palestinians?
I don't think there is guilt for Germans about Palestine. From here we start. Germans don't have guilt for Palestine. They have guilt for the Jewish nation, which is justified. But you see, this cannot happen at the expense of others. This is why I believe Germany did a massive mistake where instead of helping mediate honestly and reach a solution, it actually anchors the occupation of Palestine.
Has Germany ignored the interests of the Palestinians? For decades, Germany was busy facing up to its responsibility for the Holocaust, and that earned it praise in many parts of the world. But is there something now amiss with this picture?
For as long as the consequence of the Holocaust is an almost theatrical performance of paternalistic philo-Semitism, this country will not have done the true work that needs to be done towards having a healthy conversation around Jewishness, around genocide, and around the obligations of the State of Israel.
The Gaza war has triggered demonstrations all over the world. People are taking to the streets everywhere. In some cases, pro- and anti-Israel demonstrations face off directly. But the vast majority of international demonstrations are pro-Palestinian, and critics say the protesters question Israel's very right to exist. Many Israelis feel caught in the crosshairs.
We are targeted and kind of isolated from the rest of the world in a way. We're viewed as pariah, as the kind of group that has very unique, evil attributes.
Universities are becoming focal points of protest. At many colleges, Jewish students feel intimidated and threatened. Some have been attacked. On the other hand, Jewish students also take part in demonstrations against the war in Gaza, protests at which the term genocide is often used to describe what's happening there.
These students say, hey, as much as black history was problematic, for American slavery, this thing that's happening there is not right. And let's all fight, for the liberation of these people, because their story is our story as well, is the story of humanity.
Many students' reference point is a discussion that's been taking place at universities for years, the debate about colonialism and its consequences. In the field of post-colonial studies, Israel is often described as a colonial state and the Palestinians as victims. In the time around the founding of Israel, around 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled. They call it the Nakba, the catastrophe. As many Jewish people see it, Israel was their salvation in the wake of the Holocaust. They came as survivors, not colonial masters.
Soweit ist das noch keine
At that point, this was not yet a colonial movement.
Das Problem beginnt damit,
The problem begins when the apparent return of the Jews to Palestine, or this attempt to achieve self-determination on Palestinian territory, clashes with the rights of others.
auf dem Territorium Palästina zu verwirklichen.
It becomes colonialism the moment the rights of this population are curtailed.
In dem Moment, wo die Rechte dieser Bevölkerung beschnitten werden.
I forcefully reject the view of Israel as a colonial state as a state in 1948, but I do think that the 1967 occupation and what it has become, what it has morphed into, mostly under the impetus of a messianic movement and extreme right-winger settlers, is profoundly illegal.
Wenn jemand
If someone argues against the colonialism of the 67 settlement policy, he is in the right, and he has allies in the critics who live in Israel, like me.
Verbündete in den Kritikern, die es in Israel gibt, wie meine Wenigkeit.
Israel has occupied the West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip since 1967, a situation that the International Court of Justice recently described as illegal. It's long been clear that Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories are illegal under international law. The post-colonial conversation has taken on a new dynamic in recent years. Striking contributions to the debate have come from the global south, especially from countries that have a history of colonization by Europe, a history of imperialism and genocide. With their experiences coming into focus, does this change the view of the Holocaust? Up till now, it's been the central moral point of reference for the Western world. Influential Indian thinker Pankaj Mishra argues for a shift in values.
Recovering from the ravages of imperialism in their own countries, most non-Western people were in no position to appreciate the magnitude of the horror, the radical twin of that imperialism inflicted on Jews in Europe.
How does that affect views on the history of Israel and the Palestinians?
Most of the world is untroubled by the burden of Christian European guilt over the Shoah and does not regard the creation of Israel as a moral necessity to absolve the sins of 20th century Europeans. For more than 7 decades now, the argument among the so-called darker peoples has remained unanswerably the same. Why should Palestinians be dispossessed and punished for the crimes in which only Europeans were complicit?
A contentious standpoint that some say could be misused.
I am a historian, and it is clear to me that this is about relativizing the Shoah. That means the post-colonial mindset is not the most important thing here. First, we have the attempt to either deny or relativize the Holocaust. In this way, the Shoah is not only relativized, it slowly disappears into the past and is sometimes even justified. It's like saying, if the Jews are murdering Palestinians today, then it was not actually wrong to try to murder Jews in the past.
So is the post-colonial view anti-Semitic after all? Does it seek to erase the evaluation of the Holocaust as a universal moral standard?
It has to be the global reference point for all times, as far back as when people even began to think, over generations, for as long as the world is shaped by anti-Semitic traditions.
Unfortunately, because of the Holocaust, there is this nightmare in Palestine. I believe we should never forget the Holocaust, what happened to the Jews. It's very important that we remember. We should remember so that we don't repeat this mistake, this atrocious act in history.
The post-colonial worldview dominates cultural debates worldwide. It impels some to show solidarity with Palestinians, even some in the Jewish community, but others feel betrayed by the political left.
For me, I view the woke movement as a profound betrayal of the left. And I think of all the ideals that the left stood for, which is universalism, which is separation of state and religion, which is the struggle against inequality and putting human dignity at the center of institution and creating humane institution and fighting concentrations of power. This is the left for me. This is still very, it's still a very much needed agenda.
While the conflict continues, opinions differ radically. Germany grapples with the question of whether freedom of art and opinion should be restricted in order to prevent anti-Semitism. The debate was reignited following some artists' statements at the Berlin Film Festival in 2024. It's easy to forget that the greatest danger to Jews may come from a different direction.
The moment when many Muslims come to Europe, bringing anti-Semitic ideas born out of anti-Semitism with them, you have to be careful. And despite this, I would say that the danger from the left wing, so the danger from the Muslim faction, is relatively limited compared to the dangers coming from the right.
Aus dem rechten Flügel.
The greatest threat to the safety of Jewish people in this country are, in fact, right-wing white Germans, white ethno-nationalists, white anti-Semites who are on the rise in this country. When journalists and politicians in this country start to claim that the primary threat or the most ominous threat to Jewish lives in this country comes from leftist and intellectuals, from progressive Jewish beings, from Muslim refugees or from Muslim and Arab Germans, it is a denial of German responsibility for anti-Semitism.
The October 7 terrorist attack and the war in Gaza have triggered several bitter debates in politics and culture. How far does German responsibility for Israel go after the Shoah? Where does anti-Semitism begin? Who is a victim? Who is a perpetrator? Will there ever be a consensus? Around 100 hostages are still being held in Gaza. The Israeli army is still bombing the Gaza Strip. On top of it all, how to handle such differing views.
The only way to fight idiotic ideas is to fight them with good ideas and knowledge and scholarship.
Steve Sabella teaches at a Berlin university where Israelis and Palestinians learn and work together. His work has become more difficult and even more important.
Suddenly there is an excess of identity on all sides, It became more difficult because people feel somehow during such time they become ambassadors of their countries. They don't look at reality alone with their own eyes. Maybe certain people need to show the students, bring them to awareness. In the end, you need to form your own opinions.
German Palestinian writer Joanna Osman has been active in a peace initiative since 2012, together with Israelis, Palestinians and Iranians. She doesn't want to give up this work, even though dialogue is now harder than it's ever been.
Es ist absolut essentiell in meinen Augen, dass wir
It is absolutely essential that we use the word peace now, especially now more than ever.
Und ich weiß von meinen Freunden,
and I know from my friends in Israel and in the Palestinian territories that the word peace has become a contentious word.
Keiner nimmt das mehr in den Mund, keiner spricht.
Nobody uses it anymore. Nobody talks about peace. This is something that really gives me the feeling that this way of thinking, this division of people into normal, peace-loving people and those who jeopardize peace, that this is actually the real front, if you like.
Das eigentlich die wahre Front ist, wenn man so will.
And there are many, many more peace-loving people than extremists in all corners of the world.
Als extremistisch in allen Ecken dieser Welt.
Peace seems further away than ever, but if there is one place where difficult debates can take place, should it not be in the world of culture?